When you Google Duke, when you look up Duke, anything Duke related, there is usually a reference, a picture, a video of the Blue Devil. And I think that's super cool.
This is like a secret society I get to be a part of.
Sometimes I have to get over a little bit of the fact of like, my 15 minutes of fame was 30 years ago. Where do you go from there when you're 21?
But it really was fun to have folks pointing you out in the lines of the movie, go, hey, Ma, that's the Blue Devil over there.
The Blue Devil mascot stands out in the top tier. One of the reasons is the Blue Devil at times has had a healthy dose of irreverence that's nothing but fun.
You can do almost anything you want in the Blue Devil costume and get away with it.
The Blue Devil represents just everything that Duke is.
They kind of are the embodiment of like the passion that you get from Duke students.
I had one basketball game in the Blue Devil costume, and I was hooked.
I was on the court in Madison Square Garden. I was under the basket during Final Fours.
You know, in my book, the Blue Devil's the #1 mascot.
We're the Cameron Crazies, and the Blue Devil is the craziest of them all.
A little known fact for Duke fans that the Blue Devil was actually selected as a mascot 2 years before Duke became Duke.
In 1921, the school was known as Trinity College, and football was just reintroduced at the school following World War I.
For a long time, Duke, it was called Trinity back then, didn't have a mascot. In 1920, 1921, football was back, students were excited, and they said, we want a mascot. Here we have the Chronicle, which is a student newspaper, and there's an editorial in here called What Name Shall Represent Trinity? The students write that Trinity needs some kind of mascot to get behind. Although a number of names were suggested, the Blue Eagles, the Blue Titans, the Polar Bears, there wasn't consensus.
Lacking consensus, the editors of the Chronicle found inspiration in a group of French World War I soldiers named Chasseurs Alpins, who were known for their courage. They were nicknamed Les Diables Bleus, or the Blue Devils.
In 1922, the Chronicle began using the Blue Devils, and this is the first headline that includes the term Blue Devils, and just through repetition, the Blue Devil became Duke's mascot.
This somewhat unremarkable naming process led to one of the most famous mascots, but the earliest versions of the Blue Devil costume are not exactly iconic. In 1924, Trinity became Duke University. Over the next few years, physical representations of the Blue Devil mascot started to appear.
So the earliest visual representations that we have are from the 1920s and 30s. It's really neat to see these early photos because you see how creative people were with imagining what the Blue Devil could or should look like. So one of our earliest pictures shows a man in a baggy suit. He looks like a clown.
Looks like an Oompa Loompa.
You know, whoever did this had a degree of confidence that is almost unfathomable because you can tell who that is.
We think this picture is from the late 1920s, early 1930s, and is a particularly funny rendering of the Blue Devil.
Oh, look like a voodoo doll.
This feels like a fever dream.
This is a doll. We think it's from about the 1930s. It's made of straw, felt, wax, and some hair appears to be on there, or something like hair.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I would keep that away from small children.
The do-it-yourself nature of the Blue Devil continued into the 1950s, including a medical student named Alphonse Van Scoot, who performed as the Blue Devil when Duke played Navy in 1956.
So they got some orthopedic netting around his head, got some long johns from someplace, and we finally found some Duke blue dye and got that dyed. Well, Saturday morning, the day of the game, never forget this, he says, "Jerry, I'm losing my nervous. What should I do? What should I do?" I says, when you get out there, just do cartwheels and flips and then run down, and on the opposite side is the Navy section. And they have a mascot there, a goat. Says just pick up the goat and bring him over to the Duke bench. He was so animated that everybody in the stadium, they thought, wow, and they were all cheering him and applauding him. And he got out off the goalpost, went down and roared across and picked up the Navy goat and started back. Well, he made about 2 steps and the whole Navy plebe section descended on Alphonse, bounced Alphonse around, came down and dumped him in front of the bench, and Alphonse staggered over to the Duke bench, sat there and passed out. And that was the end of Alphonse and the Duke Blue Devil.
By the 1960s, the Blue Devil costume started to get a little more serious.
It was a cloth mask, came down below your nose, had horns.
It covered the face kind of like this.
And then the shirt was a sweatshirt with a big D on it.
Basically, we had wrestling tights and a polyester cape.
And for a tail, I had a belt that had a rope with in blue with a triangle on the bottom.
We had an actual pitchfork.
And you could see people talk to people, shake their hands, pick up the kids. So, it's just a lot of fun.
In 1980, the same year Coach K arrived at Duke, the Blue Devil got a big update.
People ask me if I ever did gymnastics as the Blue Devil. There's nobody on the planet who could do any gymnastics with this head we had to wear. It was about 2.5 feet tall, had a construction helmet on the inside that was then fastened up to hold the rest of the head, and a chin strap.
So we had a full football shoulder pad system underneath, blue leotard that zipped up in the back, that then had a leather belt that had a big Iron Duke D in the middle of it. Then you had a cape.
But I thought the big head was awesome because I think the mascot should be cartoonish, but I was told it smelled horrible.
The head could not get cleaned, the body parts could get cleaned, so I used stick-ups, which are an air freshener. So I would stick it on the inside helmet, so at least it would mask some of the horrible smells that came out of the head after many uses and not being able to clean it.
When I first saw the big head, I was amazed at how things have progressed. And it was really kind of awesome to see the costume and now a genuine costume. I did see there may be some drawbacks with it as far as being able to see and interact.
You would look out through the mouth, which was about this far away from your eyes. So it's a little like if you took a Kleenex box and cut the bottom off and tried to look through it. And so it was very hard to see. I accidentally kneed a small child in the face because he ran up to hug me and I never saw him. So, and of course you can't talk, so it's just a lot of gesturing of, oh, I'm sorry, come here.
In 2008, the Blue Devil was updated again, this time to the costume that is still used today.
And so it was clear that they were going to do something with the head. I don't remember any of the specifics of it, but I do remember seeing the small head Blue Devil for the first time.
Either came to a game or turned on the TV, I'm like, what has happened here? They shrunk the Blue Devil, it's smaller. That was my first impression. But I've come to love it, especially as I've gotten to know some of the students that have played the mascot.
And then there is a very strict order to actually getting in. So muscle suit, pants and muscle suit are most important. Scarf, outfit, tape your wrists. And this one is the strap-on one. There's clips. Just put it on. Look at that.
No matter where you are, the mascot is kept a secret. So if your roommate, your family, your friends, they know that you're the Blue Devil, you're gonna step outside of the Blue Devil character and you're gonna become yourself. And we don't want that. We want you to maintain that character throughout a game, throughout the Blue Devil walk, throughout whatever you're doing.
Part of the secrecy aspect is what made me want to do it. I took that pretty seriously. You know, you're there for the men and women that are playing, not for me.
You basically can't tell anyone. There's a couple exceptions, so like your close family can know, and that was a mistake on my part because my mom immediately posted it on Facebook, and I started getting like congrats messages from a couple like random family, and I was like, well, how do they know? Mom, so I had to like text her. I was like, I told you this can't go anywhere. Luckily, it only stayed on for like a minute, so no one found out.
It was hard. This is something that you want to tell people about because it's so important to you, but it was necessary.
Your mascot is your one central figure that kind of plays ringmaster and head clown all in one. Also, I think that they can kind of be a living, breathing billboard in your community, only one that can reach down and hug a kid.
I think the Blue Devil means a lot to Duke. We see it at all different kinds of events, any sports, any big gatherings.
I think it's a representation of our passion for all sports and really our passion for excellence as a university.
Duke is an elite institution. Sometimes elite and elitist, it's hard to tell the difference. And I think at Duke, it's elite, but I don't think elitist because the Blue Devil made it fun.
It almost feels like I have a magic wand because I can just like walk in and just like smile and people will just have a good time.
We went to cheerleading camp, believe it or not, which is exactly what you picture it to be. And we studied film of the San Diego Chicken and other mascots, and we worked with other mascots, and you really had to define the personality of your character. And for me, I think the personality trait was that the Blue Devil was always confident. And whether he had a right to be, like during football season, some of our football teams weren't so good back when I was the Blue Devil, didn't matter. The Blue Devil's confident. You know, I've had oranges thrown at me from actually Duke fans, strangely enough. I've had, people yell all sorts of insulting things. You have to just sort of roll with it.
Playful, fun, energetic. At times you can be kind of mischievous. Those are kind of the general things. However, what I like about being the Blue Devil is there's parts of him that are just me. And while every Blue Devil adds their own shade to it, you are the same color.
That costume eats up a lot of your motion of your body, so whatever you think, this is great, you need to be doing this.
You just have to be really big. It's just like if you're encountering a bear, you want to be big.
Me and my partner Blue Devil were very big raise the roof people.
I noticed that I'm sitting here with my shoulders forward a little bit. First thing that you'd want to do is snap up.
You ended up becoming a superhero.
I'd have my shoulders back. I'd be taking up a lot of space.
So, you really want to get the arms out there. You want to get them moving around like that, right?
I have no idea. I'm not even sure where to start.
This seems so weird to do without the guys, but I'm freaking out a little bit.
It's funny, I was actually a soccer recruit, and when I got here, I realized how serious about soccer they were, and I just was not. And so about 10 days in, I quit and told my parents that I was going to be the Blue Devil. And 2 years later, I did it, which is a much better assignment than being an actual varsity athlete.
I was a huge sports fan, and I really just wanted to get I don't have a lot of natural athletic ability, but I wanted to get as involved as I could.
I grew up as a Duke fan from the time I was 6. My plan originally was to be the point guard for the team. Still ended up at half court in a uniform. It just wasn't the one that I had envisioned.
If my roommate hadn't have said, "You can't do it," I wouldn't have done it. If I do it, I'll win. And no, you won't. Yes, I will. And his girlfriend goes, "Do it." Okay, I did it. It was just a fun thing to do. It really was.
Well, I came as a freshman in '68 at first football game. I saw this guy in the devil costume. So that looks like a lot of fun. He's out in the field with the cheerleaders. He gets front row seat for the game. And then I found out later the fraternity I joined, that was a Blue Devil. We had a tradition, we kidnapped him out of a basketball game, took his costume, and I got to wear it. And so as a freshman, I had one basketball game in the Blue Devil costume, and I was hooked.
When I was in high school, I came to a Duke basketball game, was with my mom, pointed at the Blue Devil during the game and said, "What if I came to Duke and became the Blue Devil?" And she said, "Why don't you try to get into Duke first?" And 18 months later, I was in the costume on the floor.
I saw the ad for tryouts for the Blue Devil, and I remember I had a sorority sister sitting next to me in the class, and I nudged her, and I just said, you know, this would be really fun to do. And that kind of snowballed from there. My sorority got involved, and they all said, you have to do it. And I'm like, y'all are nuts. And somehow that sort of was like a tsunami of support that all of a sudden I got it. I'm not sure, again, I went out and stated I wanted to do this, and it just sort of happened, and it was really wonderful.
And it's the only way I was ever going to get on the court at Cameron, so I feel like I need to take advantage of it.
I thought, there's no way that they're gonna let me be the Blue Devil. There's no way. It just can't be. I can have all the enthusiasm in the world, and there's no way, but here I am. And you can be anything. I can be a Blue Devil. There was also a time where one of my muscles fell out. I think I had a tricep that just like disappeared. We bunched up like a tank top or something and then just shoved it into where the tricep normally would be.
My first football game, within the first 5 minutes that I put the suit on, I attempted to lean on someone and they stepped out of the way and I slipped this way. The head fell off into a truck and I had to scramble into the truck, put the head back on, come back out onto the track. Literally the first thing that ever happened to me as the Blue Devil.
So in 1933, part of the Blue Devil costume was carrying a pitchfork, and the Blue Devil was carrying a real pitchfork that you would use for farming or gardening. He threw the pitchfork, and it unfortunately struck a UNC band member in the back, which is awful. The student went to Duke Hospital right away. He was fine, thank goodness. But that is one reason why you don't see a real pitchfork used with the Blue Devil anymore.
There's one time I was picked up above the field here with a helicopter flown into the stadium, and it was a two-person helicopter, so I kind of sat on the one guy's on his leg, and he just sort of held on to me, no seatbelt. And so he came flying in, circled the field, landed, and then I kind of jumped out and then ran out in the field. I was probably 20 years old, I was fearless and bulletproof, and so I had never thought about falling out.
The suit today has these little, I guess they wear normal sneakers. Back then we wore these, the feet were this big. And you would think skateboarding would be hard with that, but because they were so long, you couldn't fall. Like the feet would touch on either side, so it was really easy. It was pretty cool skateboarding around.
Like I told a cop to get off of his Segway, and then I rode it literally all the way around. And then when I got back, he was like, oh, I didn't know if you were coming back. And I was like, ah, and just walked away.
Morgan just pointed out that the mascots have their own laundry bin now with a sign, which is way different than any of us had, which was, you're on your own, good luck.
Well, we'd drive down with a couple cheerleaders, and they would pull at the gas station, and I'd run to the bathroom with my little bag, and then come back out as the Blue Devil. And every now and then people would see me run in and see me come out sort of like Superman, in the phone booth.
We changed in literally a mechanical room on the second floor of Cameron, right in the hallway where the fans were walking by.
That was it. That was it. This is where we changed. Go for it. So you can open the Blue Devil locker room. And it's a mechanical room. We had a chair and two people, like all that mechanical was in there still.
Line all the headbands up along here.
All along, on anything that was a flat
probably
surface.
down there, eventually over here. It was pretty luxurious.
Yeah.
We were treated very well. And now you see the Blue Devil has multiple heads and a coach and all these things that we didn't have, but things progress.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah,
look
history.
At that. Yeah, look at all the heads too. A lot different from the gas station bathroom.
Well, I was lucky enough to be the Blue Devil who was in attendance in Indianapolis for the championship in 2015. Top to bottom, best week of my life.
The Blue Devil mascot is at the forefront of Duke's intense fan base, which Coach K called the sixth man.
The sixth man has been responsible for so many wins leading up to these championships.
The fans aren't part of the game, but they're an integral part of the atmosphere around the game. And the mascot kind of gets everybody just a little more focused and fired up.
There's no feeling like getting hyped up by the Blue Devil
Blue Devil is probably one of the most important symbols of the Cameron Crazy environment in Cameron.
You know it's gonna be a good time and it's gonna be like very exciting and energetic when the Blue Devil shows up.
The Blue Devil's a lightning rod for energy and for emotion, and I know for my team, it translates for how we want to play.
In 2019, Duke won the ACC championship, and so I was on the court in Charlotte, and so absolutely loved it.
We went to the men's Final Four in 2001 and 2004, and we went to the women's Final Four in 2002 and 2003. So if you ask me, my favorite basketball player in Duke history is Elena Beard, number 20, and going to the women's Final Fours were truly amazing.
This is the piece of the net from that game. The character is a big part of it, but being in the suit, you're sort of a little part of the moment, but being part of the moment is still pretty special.
Probably the premier highlight for me as a Blue Devil, March 28th, 1992, which is known as the shot.
Here's the pass to Leitner. Puts it up.
Some people consider that the best college basketball game ever played. I was very lucky to be the mascot at that game and was able to see the amazing throw from Grant Hill to Christian Leitner to make that last second shot that put us into the Final Four.
Met Wallace Wade, the coach that the stadium's named for. And he told me, he said, hey man, I've been here since the beginning. You're the best one I've ever seen.
I have this photo and Coach K wrote on it, hi John, you were the best looking Blue Devil ever. I treasure that. It's on my wall in my office, I love it.
So my distinction was I was the first female Blue Devil. I think I knew I had a harder road to be chosen because they had never selected a woman. And the biggest impediment for women doing it back then, you did have to be 5'10" or above in the bigger head suit. And I'm 6 feet tall, so I was able to at least hit that requirement. And the rest was on me to make sure I had a good tryout.
Yeah, I was black. Yeah, I was the Blue Devil. Yeah, it was the first. But you gotta understand, I wasn't the black Blue Devil. I was everybody's Blue Devil.
Despite being loved by many fans, Michael did face prejudice during his time as a Blue Devil at Duke.
You know, they'd have functions, dinners, whatever. They'd want the cheerleaders there, didn't want the Blue Devil there, and particularly did not want black people there. It was that Southern double standard. I didn't get invited to the athletic banquet, and that's where they give the letters and stuff. If I didn't know they were having a banquet, no jacket. The Duke that I knew and loved came through, saying, Mike, you know, we want to make it right, and they did.
In 2013, Duke invited Michael to a home football game to be a guest of honor and receive a Letterman's jacket.
I was proud in that moment. Duke did the right thing. It was cool.
One of the joys of my life is getting to know everyone who was a mascot before me and after me. For all of us to have been able to get to know each other and hear the stories and compare notes has just been a tremendous joy.
As Blue Devils, it's been fun. We've had reunions over the last 4 years, and we formed our tongue-in-cheek version of the Otherhood to get together. So it's a big part of my life, and I have some pride in that, and continue to love it.
It's fun. You just start meeting people, and you realize that you're just not the only one. It wasn't a flash in the pan and you're done. There's still some continuity here, and you have a common bond.
Even somebody saying like, oh, I was the Blue Devil in this year, the intimacy that comes with that and the intimacy knowledge of what I've gone through, while not the same, likely mirrors their experience at college as a whole, which is really interesting.
It's such a niche experience, you know? So being able to meet with folks who have it it's awesome.
I think everybody's got this common thread. You really just, appreciate humor and having fun and that kind of thing like that. So like, it's really clear you're my kind of people.
I met the guy today who actually started the tradition of the headband, which might be the highlight of my day.
The guy who first made the first headband.
You're the guy.
I wanted to be able to say something, and you're not allowed to talk as the Blue Devil. I started off actually doing a sign inside the cape. And then about halfway through the year, it became popular through the NFL. Jim McMahon started wearing a headband to nudge Pete Rozelle, who was NFL commissioner. So it was a little bit trendy. But we started writing our own messages on the headband, and somehow it's lived on for 40 years after that.
Proud to be a part of the program. Okay, proud to be a part of the history. I am not a member of the U.S. Senate, but I am a member of a more exclusive club.
Being that iconic representative of the university, a place that I love, that I grew up with, really means a lot to me as I've gotten older, and has really become my identity.
We always looked up to the Blue Devil as kind of the gold standard of popularity in a mascot, and we all wanted to emulate it.
The Blue Devil has always been kind of an inviting thing to me, and I really like the old one with the big smile and the huge head. I just think it's a cool thing and a really cool mascot.
The school spirit at Duke is like no other school, and you can talk to people that went to school here 5 years ago or went to school here 50 years ago. You get them with the Blue Devil around, and they still feel that.
I think Duke puts a lot of faith in everybody who puts on that suit to do right by the school.
There are very few truly iconic images and symbols on campus that it resonates with everyone and everyone connects with. But the Blue Devil is one of those symbols, and I represented that. It's crazy. It's awesome.
It's very, very cool to have been part of this. It's one of the best things I ever did in my life.
I wrote that one, and they told us we weren't allowed to use it anymore.
Wear it.
Yeah, you have to take that off.
My head's so big.
It's huge.
Look.
But we could at least see it.
Wait, how do you get it on? Oh, wait, so they different.
Their sizes? He never got a head.
I never did.
Paul never got a head. Yeah!
Let's go Duke! Let's go Duke! Let's go Duke! Let's go Duke! Let's go Duke!